Hey guys, welcome back. Winter here with another StarCraft 2 Pro build order guide. This time it's for Terran players. This one is for TVZ. Actually started off with the Zerg builds versus Zerg builds. It seems a lot of people are having issues with those at the moment. But this is the Reaper expand into Hellion Cloak Banshee, which is you may recognize it as one of the most popular builds from Heart of the Swarm just in general. It's definitely not changed too much since then. It's still a viable build. It does have its vulnerabilities, but it gets you the information early on that you need in order to defend attacks, and also sets you up with a lot of units that if a Zerg player is caught out of position or they're being too greedy, you can do a lot of damage. It can transition into mech or bio, though usually you'll see it used to transition into bio, but it gets you set up with an early infrastructure and early production that allow you to deal with a lot of different threats. Once again, it does have its vulnerabilities, which are mostly in the form of early Roach Ravager attacks or Nidus Worm, stuff like that. But if you keep your units in the right spot at the right time, you react accordingly, you're not losing units. Like losing the Reaper is an important thing to avoid. Then you can get yourself into a very comfortable position to move into a macro game. Another important thing is not to be passive with these units. If you have Hellions, you have Banshees, you do not want to be sitting at home with them. Unless, of course, you're under some sort of direct attack that requires your full attention. So the focus early on is to get the Reaper and see, is he going for Zergling speed? Does he have gas? Is he taking any bases? Well, more bases than I expected, or bases different than I expected, especially on a map like Prion Terraces, where you might see if your opponent is going for a gold base. A base like a gold base can be exploited by Hellion Banshee in the way that you can cut off, if there's a difference, if there's a long distance between two bases, then you can exploit the fact that queens and zerglings and even drones have trouble moving between the bases safely. So you might be able to exploit that. But early on here, I'm just going for the wall. We're starting the Reaper. It was a 15 barracks, 16 refinery. Gives me enough gas to get the Reaper and get the orbital, and then a command center on the low ground slightly after that. You could go for the command center before going for the wall off. It's a little bit greedier. There's no SCV scout here in case he goes for a pull first, but it's minimal. It's negligible risk. I just wanted to play it safe for this. Now the Reaper comes out and immediately goes across the map. There should be no way, unless he went for like a 12-12 or something, that he has Zergling speed done by the time you get across the map. So that is not a concern. You just got to be on top of that Reaper. Getting the information on where he's expanding, when he's expanding, and what he's teching up to is the most important thing the Reaper can do. I'd be able to get a scout in here, see does he have gas, maybe get a scout on the pool itself to see if speed has started. You can take a look, like you actually click on the gas and see how much has he mined. Could he be going for Zergling speed now? Like if your opponent has mined 150 gas, like you see from the remaining, starts at 2,000. Then maybe it's going to be some sort of roach pressure if you didn't see a roach warren. That doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't have one, unless you've been able to scout the entirety of the creep. So, from here, just a couple Marines. These are useful for basic early defense in case he tries to counterattack with some Zerglings and gets by your Reaper. It's very important to keep the Reaper alive until you either see that he's committing to Zergling speed or see some other attack coming across. This Reaper being alive as long as possible to get scouts on third bases, whether roaches are coming in, whether there's maybe a huge Roach Ravager attack or something like that. Just trying to keep active on the Reaper. See if he's, for example, if he has two queens spreading creep, maybe he can't attack quite as early because he's invested 300 extra minerals just on working on creep spread. So maybe he doesn't have that early of an attack. But from here, I've added on a starport immediately after the factory, switched over the reactor, and then made a tech lab on the barracks. It'll go make a tech lab of its own. I usually choose to transition into bio off of this. You can be researching STEM while you go for the attack. And just a couple more things to point out is right around this timing, you start to have a decent chunk of money banked up. You don't quite have enough to go for another base. And actually, if you're spending all your money on SCVs and Hellions and Banshees and all of that, you won't have enough to be making too many extra barracks. But right around the time you get your 4th to 6th Hellions, like right about now, we're about 4 minutes in the game. Maybe it could have been a little bit earlier if I did the build perfectly on point. This is when you got to make a decision. Are you going to take a third command center? Are you going to add more barracks or possibly factories? And is there any threat of him going for an early attack? Like if he's going for a quick Nidus Worm, which is one of the most dangerous plays in Legacy of the Void, you need to make sure your units are at home ready to defend. By this point, if you haven't determined with a Reaper, that he's going either for a third base or for a lair. Or if you don't see a third base, then you need to be finding out, okay, is he going for maybe quick mutas? Is it going to be a Nidus network? These are all of the biggest threats early on. Past that, if you see they're taking an early third base, they're just going for the speedlings. You can continue to harass, keep the pressure on, because otherwise they're going to have the money to tech up and have a solid drone count. The entire intent here is if your opponent is going for a heavy economy build early on, then you are able to cut them down to size. If they're not going for an early economy, you have the tools to scout and potentially deal with those early attacks and force them to go all in. So that way, once you defend, you're in the advantageous position. So just keep in mind, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Well, more like a sword and a shield at the same time, because you can be attacking if your opponent is not focusing on the early aggression, but you might need to come back to defend if it's going to be a Nidus or it's going to be a Roach Pressure or something like that. Because Hellions aren't the worst against Roaches and Ravagers. They're not great, but anything helps when you're dealing with those early attacks. I opt for a bunker early on just to play it relatively safe. I usually transition into a third command center, assuming they're going for a third base. If they're not, probably adding on more barracks, maybe even a bunker or two in the main. If I suspect a Nidus player, I've already scouted it. But you can kind of get an idea. Remember, if you see those extra early queens early, maybe going for creep spread or pushing your Hellions away, think, especially if they're still on 2-base, this could be a Nidus play, because a lot of players will open up with 4 or 6 queens and then put them in the Nidus network so they can transfuse it immediately as it comes out. I should have my Marine patrolling here looking for any overlords that are close enough. But once again, the biggest threats are the Nidus and just the early 2-base pressure. If they're going for speedlings and they're going for a third base, you should be able to put some pressure on and keep yourself in a comfortable position. Now, don't get carried away with the Hellion and Banshee micro. I know a lot of players really want to maximize it, get as much done as they can, and then end up having 1,000 minerals at home. So keep that in mind as well. It's not the hardest build to execute. It's pretty simple. If you're a Terran player at a higher level, you've probably been doing this for a while. But I just wanted to put it out there, maybe for the lower level Terran players that don't quite have the builds or the knowledge or the experience to have this build down 100%. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Make sure to leave feedback in the comments. I know this is a simpler build order than some of the other ones I'm going to put up, but hopefully it helps you guys out. Good luck, have fun, and happy StarCrafting.